So what I believe you were trying to say is
It is no surprise that animation is Hollywood's most successful and innovative genre. But what actually makes animation so unique and refreshing? When we think about the technical conditions of cinema, animation and anime or cell animation are set apart from each other. However, what if what unites them is not just telling a story, but in fact how they borrow and enhance each feature uniquely? In 2004, Thomas Lamar, an academic in media studies and cinema, discussed this subject in his essay, The Mood Planner Image. Two important terms that are consistent through his works are the concepts of cinematism and animatism. As you may infer, the concepts touch upon what makes each medium unique. Lamar based cinematism on Viril's work, who defines that the essence of cinematism lies in the use of mobile apparatuses of perception, which serve 1. To give the viewer a sense of standing over and above the world and thus controlling it, and 2. To collapse the distance between the viewer and the target, in the manner of the ballistic logic of instant strike or instant hit. In simpler words, the camera becomes the viewpoint for the spectator. It feels like one is moving into the landscape, thus creating and needing depth to happen. Depth, however, is the key difference to animatism. The characteristic of animatism is the separation of the image into multiple planes. The result is a multiplanar image. Commonly known as cell animation or 2D animation, animatism is not about movement into depth, like cinematism is, but movement on and between surfaces. For those who are not familiar with cell animation, here's a quick explanation. Cell animation, or traditional animation, is hand-drawn. To spare efforts, animators separate each component of the scene into layers. Usually the first layer would be a background, the second layer would be the characters, and the third and above layer would be moving objects such as mouths or snow and others. The outcome, as you can see, is usually a steady background where the characters are noticeable layered above. In order to keep work concise and low budget, it's hard for you to see scenes like this in animation without the help of 3D softwares, especially because this is a characteristic of cinematism.
Since I was a child, and then she died. I have a beautiful grave.
This scene illustrates how depth of field and camera movement are implemented in cinema. Since 3D animation's first film, this technique has been explored.
O precioso Andy deve estar.
You can see in the story sequence how we can see cinematism taking place when Woody sees Andy bed sheets with Buzz face, but the majority of scenes are still steady. However, there was some difficulty for the software to process the ambience without distortions. Another years later, the animation The Incredibles premieres with scenes that Lamar would call supercinematism. The mode plan system gives the viewer the impression of being able to move around inside the image, as if the image had become a world. Moreover, the viewer can move around more rapidly and freely than in daily life. Cinema also aimed for such effects, from its earliest attempts to produce a voyage into the world on the screen. But animation is not a simple repetition of the cinematism. Mood plan techniques in animation can actually push beyond the limits of live action camera work. Animation has the potential to fly faster and further. In this respect, at least, animation does not merely replicate or simulate the ballistic style optics of cinematism. It is a multiplication and even a powering of it, cinematism to the 10th power. There is, however, one recent movie which I believe is not only cinematism to the 10th power in a few scenes like most movies, but also the steady presence of supercinematism in almost every scene makes it the core of the movie. The award-winning animation feature Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse takes advantage of cinematism and delivers a movie that Lamar would probably be ashamed to once have called The Incredibles astonishing. Let's see a few things that highlights the supercinematism. Not only that, even calm and steady images have some mild camera move. From my research, most animated movies would use only a few cinematic scenes through its entirety. There was an explored opportunity in the field that Sony saw and took advantage of. Let's see a scene from the movie Big Hero 6 that is from familiar category. We can tell that this movie follows cinematic conventions. However, if we would implement supercinematism implemented in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the camera possibly would be following Hero closely and following the platform's movement. However, the extensive use of supercinematism is not only what makes Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse special. The exploration of animatism and a further step back into cell characters' iconic flat characteristics also create uniqueness. Animatism, however, is not as implemented since supercinematism plays the key role in the movie. But the few moments and seconds it appears are enough to make it meaningful. Despite having a lot of information in just a few seconds, if we isolate each frame, we can see the flatness of the image and its direct animatism. One interesting thing to mention is that these are scenes referring to the source material. Despite this reference not being something new in anime, it hasn't been fully explored in American animation, what makes it a novelty for this audience. Lastly, I would like to discuss the movie's character design. The characters have what can be mentioned as ink lines. The first is obvious. It makes it feel like it's a drawing, a cartoon. The second, however, is that it gives a false sensation of flatness to the characters, almost simulating a 2D drawing, but at the same time, the 3D aspects are still obvious, as you can see from the shadows. Lamar states that while there are hyper-cinematic moments in The Incredibles, Pixar has learned that such films would work better with rather flattened characters. That is, characters that retain much of the iconic qualities of flat cell animation characters. Relating in two cents to the movie in question. Possibly the flattening effect was meant to help the audience have a better viewing experience due to its high number of hyper-cinematic moments. And also to create new flat characteristics that would distance at its most from hyper-real characters and get closer to cartoony style intended. On a side note, we have seen that often games are always looking to create hyper-real characters, while animation usually distances from that. One trend in animation that I particularly find interesting is when studios decide to give a somewhat artsy and refreshing feeling to the piece, such as, obviously, Spider-Man to the Spider-Verse, and Arcane, Love, Death and Robots, and many more.